Okay, so like 3 years ago or so, maybe 4 years ago, my other brother was trying to kind of encourage me into being career minded. I was 30 now, and it was time that I start growing up. And my mindset about career had always been to not have a career and to just work odd jobs, making money, doing whatever, just living a simple life. My one dream was always just to find the ideal partner and to have my own family and then to go from there, and just kind of to do whatever I wanted whenever I felt like it. And I hold true to that, but he had started getting me into career mindedness where, well, you got to be able to support those things and support those dreams. And it took a while for me to figure out what it was that I enjoyed doing, even that I could even consider making a career out of. But he had got me to start listening to a comedy podcast, and we really enjoyed it together. We started doing comedy together just for fun. And one day he was like, "What about this? Like, why don't you do comedy?" Um, and I was like, "Huh." I never really considered that something worth pursuing. And the more that we got into it, the more that I realized that it was absolutely a way that people make the livings that they want to live. That it was right up my alley for what it was that we were looking for at the time, for sure. So I just started pursuing it. I started networking. I started pursuing it on different levels, um, and that took me a lot of very interesting places. It was that drive that I started to work off of that, um, and was still just working odd jobs. I moved out of my ex's house and started working as a maid, um, and as a caregiver, and was spending all of my free time pursuing comedy, doing stuff online, and continuing to network. And then I went out to LA post COVID in order to try to pursue it more seriously. My goal had always been eventually to end up in LA and to try to build up from there in the entertainment industry. But LA is, well, it's a lot different post COVID. It was always a hard place to kind of make it, but that was my goal. It didn't matter if it was a hard place to make it. That was never the deterrent. Once I got out there, though, post COVID, things were not at all accessible. Things weren't even accessible for people that had already made a living doing those things. And most of the people that I had networked with had moved to Austin, Texas by that point, following Joe Rogan and the comedy scene that's growing here. So I continued to work for it. I was living out of my car for a couple months there in LA, and then was around in California, went back to Wisconsin with the intent to sell my things, ended up living with my other brother for a short time, then went back out to Seattle, back out to California, worked at a farm for a while. I hadn't fully gotten away from my goals of pursuing comedy as a career, but I had kind of let the the drag of life, the different sorts of things that I had to take care of kind of get in the way of that drive. Um, to a degree, I definitely got distracted with things, and but it was okay because I was living my life. I was doing a lot of things that I was finding enjoyment in the day to day in a way that I never had before, and I was going out and doing things that I'd always planned on doing, and was finding success in things in different ways that I just never had anticipated. So I was building myself up for sure, um, but I did kind of break away from the scene a bit. To the point that last year I was working in Wisconsin. I was living as a live-in caregiver, and then I was working doing landscaping at the same time. So I was working nonstop, and maybe only had like a day off a week, and that got to the point where it wasn't fully sustainable. I wanted to keep my landscaping job and didn't want to keep the live-in caregiving job. Because of that, I ended up losing the place that I was living in. Just because the woman, after having me care for her, didn't want me to continue to live there if I wasn't caring for her. There was personal points of conflict there. So I moved out and had to quit my job landscaping because I moved back into my car with my dogs, uh, per the usual, because it's very, very hard in Wisconsin to find an apartment within the matter of 30 days with no savings when you have two dogs. Just doesn't really. So I ended up back in my car again, and at that point, I decided to move down to Florida. Um, I had been talking to this guy for 8 months who I had dated back when I was 19 for a few months, and he had come back around after all these years and had been like, you're the one that always got away, and I want to be able to pursue these things with you. And my whole point was that he was trying to get far too serious far too quickly, that he needed to take his time to get to know me because he was the second person I'd ever been with, and I've lived quite a life since then. But he was dead set on trying to commit, and so I agreed to move closer to him to start pursuing the relationship more seriously. But my goal was still to take things slowly. And after I moved to Florida, I lived maybe like 30 minutes away from him or so, and I was seeing him every day. We dated for the week. I think I seen him most of the days that week, and within just a week of being with him, I was like, "No, you're asking too much right off the bat. Like, you just," and there was no sense of like trying to respect me and who I really am and what I've really been through and what I was asking for. He was just trying to get me married and pregnated, and that wasn't what I wanted from him, and not what I wanted at that time. And things at the place that I had moved were not at all what they had set themselves up to be. There was like 5 more people living in the house than I was told would actually be living there. The air wasn't on for the entire time I was there, basically. So we were in like 90 plus degree weather in the house. And it was just, the shower broke, the pool never got cleaned. It was just, and then I started getting followed home. I got followed home 3 different times from work, and that made me wildly uncomfortable. So at that point, I was like, I'm gonna just head on out of here. I never wanted to be in Florida in the first place. The only reason I moved there was because that's where the guy was. And when I realized that I just didn't want to be there, I was like, well, I never wanted to go to Texas either, which is why I had always avoided it. But knowing that all the people that I had networked with prior had moved out there and stuff, I was like, well, maybe I should pick that up again, and maybe I should try to get back into comedy and start, pursuing the thing that I had set out to pursue in the first place. So I ended up driving out to Austin and moving there in my car with my dogs. And that was Thanksgiving of last year. Okay, so things get wild because within like a few days of being in Austin, my wisdom tooth cracked and broke in half, and a piece of it came out. And I was like, well, that can't be good. My left wisdom tooth, that gave me a feeling about things, but I just dealt with it and continued on. It wasn't really causing me too many problems. But it was the beginning of something, because I'm still dealing with it. But the first night that I was there, I watched the comedy podcast that my other brother had got me into. I happened to see a new comic on there that I highly enjoyed, so I added him on Instagram. He immediately friended me back, and so I hopped in his inbox like I do, just being straightforward, full dick out. We hit it off, because of that, and we palled around for a while, until he basically, like, I feel that he had betrayed me. I mean, he did. He did some stuff behind my back in order to get the benefit of it without having to give me any of it, and like, that was fine, but at the same time, it wasn't like, okay, well then I'm not going to have a personal relationship with you because I can't trust you. So I kind of started pulling away from that, and at the same time, because of I immediately got affiliated with the comedy scene again, and with the people that I had networked with, and was communicating with all of them. But because I had got in with that guy, Um, I just kind of, when I pulled away, like really didn't know where I stood with people or with things, and kind of just wanted to take a bit of a respite to kind of see things from, a better perspective. And so there was about 2 weeks right before New Year's. There was a week right before New Year's that I had pulled away. I was planning on doing all this stuff for New Year's and, with the comedy scene, and instead I didn't. Um, I just kind of stayed at home, just doing my thing. And then um, New Year's came, and I decided to go to a New Year's party with my roommate's friends, um, because it was something more low key. And uh, I had really been enjoying my time with them. And really, I wanted to get out, but I didn't want to do anything that felt like I had to, like perform for anything. So it was a nice thing to be able to go to that party with them. And at the party, I went with a couple girls and a couple guys, and one of the guys that I went with, we were joking around. I mean, we were interested in each other in different ways, but I also was kind of on the fence about things. But we were jokingly, we had decided to pretend that we were brother and sister, and then progressively got more flirtatious with each other over the night, just to make people uncomfortable. Um, and then by the time it became a point where people were like, wait a second, you guys are brother and sister. And we were like, well, yeah, but that's why we came here to Texas, because everything's legal here. And people were like, oh, like kind of whatever. But this one dude and his friend had come and started playing the guitar with one of the guys that we came from, and they started making songs. And the dude, like, he just came and sat and started playing music, and he was just freestyling. And the song that he was singing, he kept talking about the lesbian that like wasn't giving him, that wouldn't pay him any attention, and he was referring to me. And it was funny because like it took me a minute to realize that he was talking about me, but he kept calling me the lesbian. And when I realized it, I just started cracking up. It was so funny, and I just immediately like dug the dude, like, okay, this guy's cool. Well, as soon as we started talking, then his friend came up, who apparently was very nervous to have come up before that point, and he sat next to me. And as soon as he sat next to me, I saw him looking at me, and I tried to ignore it because I could feel his energy. And to be honest, what it felt like, the moment he sat down, what it felt like was this dream that I had after my best friend passed away back in 2013. He told me that he would visit me again in a dream. And when he did, how it worked was that like I was sitting on this park bench, and he came and like slumped down next to me and was sitting next to me, and we were both looking forward. And then at one point, like I looked at him and he turned and looked at me. It was like that. It felt just like that. Where like when he sat next to me, he felt like somebody that I'd known just forever. And like it felt like, oh, it's you. Like, I don't know. It felt like there was this whole world connected to this person before I even looked at him. And when I turned and looked at him, he's just sitting there smiling at me, big old smile, all bright eyed. And I honestly was immediately overtaken and went into super confident mode, like I do when I am in those positions. I try to my best to make it seem like that's not the case, and like I'm totally cool, And we started talking, and I remember him like I don't even remember exactly how the conversation started, but I remember at one point like him ask like me saying something, and him being like, well, what is it that you want from me? And I was like, I want to know everything. Like I want to understand all of this. He was like, okay, I'll tell you everything. Like I'll give you everything. And I was like, okay, whatever. How it when I first looked at him, I recognized him, but not just as who he is. I also recognized like the past lives that I'd had with him, and specifically the most recent one, which was interconnected with. Okay, so the way that I say that maybe gives like past lives gives like a certain connotation to things, but that's not. I don't view time as linear. It sits on top of itself, and everything happens at once. Um, so like, there was this dude during the period of time right before I moved to California, there's this dude that I'd been pursuing who just played me the entire time. Nothing ever came of it aside from him hurting my feelings, really, and me having to learn a lot of hard lessons through it. So I'm thankful for it, and I'm thankful that he was the person that I learned those things through. But um, it was a hard time, and so like I immediately, when I saw this guy and like had like the connection between him and this dude that I'd pursued, I I just I put up a lot of defenses. Um, I just put up a lot of defenses because it's like, you're trying to get me. Like you're just gonna play me. You're just trying to play with my heart. Um, so I was holding out against it, and like I kind of just still palled around with them all throughout the party or whatever like that. And I ended up giving him my number, but I was like still like on guard about it. I gave him a number because I was interested in him, but at the same time, I was like, I'm not gonna fall for this sort of deal. Um, and like 3 days later, 4 days later, he texted me because I hadn't texted him yet, and was like, "Oh, I found this water bottle. I think I might have accidentally grabbed it from the party. Is it anybody that you knows?" Um, and I didn't respond. I didn't talk to him for 10 days, and then I kept going through like, cause he triggered all of these weird romantic feelings in me that I wasn't fully prepared for at the time. And it made me start thinking about the dude that I'd just been played by, because that was the last relationship. Well, okay, so like I said, I'd been talking to that dude for 8 months, technically dating that dude for 8 months. It wasn't like I was with anybody else during that time. And then I moved to be with him, and that didn't work out. That was like a week long, like, okay, never mind. So it wasn't like that wasn't like a real relationship. That was, that wasn't like a real relationship for me, but um, it was something that yeah, it was a relationship. It was something that I was still working through. But more than anything, I was still honestly just tripped up on that dude for the 2 years that I'd pursued him. And so, like, that's what I was carrying with me into trying at all to even, like, communicate with this guy or establish any sort of relationship with him. And he was extremely patient about that. Like I said, it took 10 days. Through that time, I kept being like, okay, like I can handle this. I can do this. Like, I'm just gonna be with this guy super casually. That was my plan. I was like, I'm gonna hit him up because I was interested in being with him. I was very attracted to him right off the bat. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna hit him up, and I'm gonna keep it super super casual, and like it'll probably be like a one night stand sort of deal. Like, it'll be cool. Like, whatever, I'm playing it cool. And that was my plan, to be honest. Like, not proud of it looking back. At the time, I felt confident being like, yeah, this is just gonna be like a simple, easy sort of thing. And that was my goal. Like, when I hit him up, was that we would go out and that I would seduce him as much as he would let me seduce him, or that he would seduce me, and that we would end up sleeping together and maybe being like friends with benefits type deal. But I thought that I could maintain myself emotionally. I was like really confident in myself until we went out. He completely agreed. He was so excited to go out with me. He told me that he had told his best friend, the guy that was at the party with us, like, that I finally hit him up and he was going to go out with me, and he was so excited about it. And all of those things hit me in the heart, but I was still healing, and I didn't want to process things that way. And I kept like putting up these dividers between the ways that I was feeling emotionally and the ways that I was telling myself I didn't want to feel it. You know what I mean? Um, but like, that was literally one of the best dates I've ever had. Um, but I've had wonderful dates. I recently even had a couple wonderful dates, and like, people, like, I've met men that are extremely good to me, and like that treat me with the value that I deserve. And I've learned through those things. I've been blessed to be able to learn through those things where my value really is and what I really am worth. But at the same time, like, there's something so special about this guy. There's just, I mean, I know now what it is. I didn't know then what I was getting myself into, even though it was all so obvious and all right in front of me. He was everything that I'd ever asked for. Like, he really was like just absolutely my ideal. But I was trying so hard to not get involved that way. I'd been so hurt from playing that dude that like I had gone back into like, oh, I'm not looking for a commitment. I'm not looking for relationships. Like, I'm just looking to pursue this career in comedy and to make something of myself in entertainment, and I'm not going to let myself get like tied up in, you know, the simple life when I could be living so big and all of these, fulfilling all these wild dreams and stuff. And that was a constant point of conflict when it came to it, because then we started dating. I couldn't even help myself. I wanted to date him. He was just so good to me. He was just so kind and so affectionate and so openly communicative, like so vulnerable with me just right off the bat. Right off the bat. Within our first like 3 or 4 dates, I mean, I was honestly floored by how vulnerable he had been with me. And I did not know how to process it or how to take it. I'd never had a man be that way. That type of personality too, because like there's certain types of guys that like are just, they're that way and they're that way comfortably with people and stuff. But like this guy's different because like he is that way naturally, and he does have such a kind and tender heart, and he loves to put himself out that way with people. And like the people at his job and stuff, like they all know him to be that way. But at the same time, he's also very like stoic in his emotions. Like he's very guarded. He doesn't just trust people. He doesn't like most people. Like he's very kind to people and he's very friendly, but at the same time, like he has strong boundaries. And I don't know. He's just a very unique type of person. Um, Not that other people aren't. It's not a competition. There's just something very special about the person that he is when it comes to me and like what it is that I look for in a companion. And even just in all the things that he taught me, like how he, being the person that he is, how it taught me these things, where like other situations have technically taught me those lessons and other people have taught me those lessons, but it's never hit the same way. um, there's something just so special about him, and I was really, really struggling with it because I felt like it was trying to break me down, like it was trying to get me to submit and to commit when I was so set on, being independent and being self-sustainable and working out this comedy career and or whatever forms of entertainment. Um, and he even, I mean, he was so kind about that, even because like I explained those things to him to a degree, and like he explained to me like that I could have both. He was like, what are you talking about? Like most of the greatest comedians are all like married and have good, like they have their own lives and stuff like that, and then like their comedy is just what they do on the side. Like that's how they become great. And it was hard for me to swallow because like he was right, and I was going about things in such a different way, and I just truly didn't know myself, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I was just trying to behave confidently, um, without getting caught up in issues that I'd seen myself have in the past. And it was very, very hard for me to separate those things from the present, and to realize like that this guy wasn't people from my past, and that he wasn't, you know, trying to bring me down. He was trying to give me everything. He was trying to give me his world, and I wasn't valuing it properly by any means. I mean, I was defending myself against it, and um, it just kind of like, it got to points where like there was a couple different times where like I would even like kind of fight him about it, where like we'd start arguing, and he was like, why are we even arguing? Like, I'm not trying to fight you. I don't want to have conflict with you. If we can't come to a point of agreement, we don't need to have this conversation at all. Like, I'm not going to fight you. And like those things, like he was teaching me a way of being that I had never seen before, and a way of being in a relationship and being with a partner that I was not accustomed to. And I didn't know how to respond properly. I was being very immature and being very selfish. And I was trying to engage with him romantically in all of these free ways that made me feel good, but then the ways that were forcing me to kind of compromise or to reconsider were ways that I wasn't willing to, and that wasn't fair. He wasn't asking me to actually compromise myself. He was asking me to be willing to see things from a different perspective so that I didn't feel like I was being compromised, because he wasn't trying to get me to compromise myself. And I just kept like making him the bad guy in a way, not intentionally, and I didn't realize that I was doing it at the time. He was stating those things, and I was like, no, like, I'm not doing that. That's you not being understanding of me. I didn't realize at the time. I was way too caught in my head and way too caught in my ego. And I wasn't valuing him properly at all. And I didn't even recognize it. Like, that's what's so frustrating about it now looking back, because it was like he was literally, now I keep seeing like these things that I've written in the past, like years and years and years ago, even about like my ideal partner and what I've always been looking for and what I actually always wanted. And the whole reason that I even started pursuing all of these different careers and all these different more lofty ideas was because I wasn't finding that in someone, and I was like, well, if, my perfect partner's out there, and when I find them, I'll find them. And in the meantime, I'm just going to do all this stuff. And that slowly turned into just like, I'm never going to find this person. And so this is what I have to do for myself, to the point that I got convoluted. And that became like a barrier between me being able to recognize the universe giving me what I'd always asked for, and me still feeling like I wasn't being given that, and that I still had to work so hard for it. And there was like a point even where like when I started to accept it more, where but like I was still fighting it. And like even now I struggle with it, because I told him like, I'm not in a place to like be able to offer you anything. Like, what do I have to offer? I'm still trying to figure out my career. I'm still trying to like, I don't have any money. I don't have my own space. Like, what do I have to offer you? And he was like, you have you to offer. Like, you don't have to offer anything more than you. Somebody that wants to be with you will be happy to be with you just as you are. And he was, and I didn't recognize it. I did, and I didn't value it. I didn't appreciate it for what it was worth. I was too set on, no, this is what my dreams are going to look like, and this is what things are going to look like. I didn't know myself. I wasn't listening to myself at all. And because of that, I ended up, that's why I ended up back at my parents in the first place, was because I wasn't trusting myself, and I didn't fully know myself, and I felt defeated, and I was running away from all of those feelings, and I didn't know how to confront him about those things, and I didn't know how to confront anybody else about anything else. And I felt extremely overwhelmed with just everything. There were so many issues going on with with my roommate. I started having, so my teeth started causing an infection in my mouth that was like debilitating, to the point where I couldn't even think clearly. And like I was trying to take medication for it and trying to whatever, but I couldn't afford to actually get any work done. And I was just getting really cunty. I was getting overwhelmed. I was getting really anxious, and I was in pain. And I was already at a point of frustration with my roommate for different personal reasons. But then also like the lifestyle, our lifestyles are so different, and she's involved in things that I don't live like that. So like that became a point of conflict, to the point that I ended up just being like, all right, I'm gonna just move out. And ended up moving back into my car. And a week after I moved back into my car, I started getting super sick, like a week prior to moving into my car. Maybe a little bit before then, but it kind of started becoming progressive. And by the time I had moved into my car, I was just sick all day, all the time. And I was like, I knew what it was, but I didn't want to accept it. And it took that long for me to be willing to. But after I'd moved into my car, I went to the doctor, and it was validated that I was pregnant. And it was something that when I had first gotten with that guy, he had talked about having a family with me, and he was like, I'd be willing to have a family with you. And he brought it up multiple times, and every time he did, I just shot it right down immediately. Like, I was like, no, I don't want a family. I don't want these things. I was speaking from the mindset that I had created to sustain myself. like all of the, like the, you know, like the career and all of the everything that I was trying to do, like was just a cover up for what it was that I thought that I would never have. And I forgot that that's even why I was doing that stuff. I really had lost myself. And so, like, when it was literally being presented to me multiple times on a silver fucking platter, I didn't see it as that. And I kept denying it and rejecting it, to the point that by the time I was pregnant, like, we had already, like, I'd already put a wall in between us and kind of pulled away from the relationship in different ways. And, like, you know, the only time that I was talking to him, like, I was just full of complaints. I was full of anxiety. I was full of, like, all of these different issues that I was going through, and, like, was half expecting him to be there for me emotionally when, like, I wasn't being there for him. He was there for me an entire week and listened to me and listened to my complaints and tried to be there for me. And then after, like, 4 or 5 days, like, it got to the point where he was like, he just couldn't. And then he let me know how his week had been. And I realized, like, wow, I haven't been here for you at all. And you've been going through just as fucking much as I have been. And you didn't have anybody. And meanwhile, on top of it, you were taking care of me. And, like, what the fuck is my problem? And then I let the guilt set in, and I let the guilt drive another wall in between us. And by the time that I